Welcome to the final episode of Season 2 of In the Arena. We've been exploring Bill Emerson's political rise and the transformation of Southeast Missouri politics. We ended the last episode with the death of Congressman Emerson. We are joined today by Lloyd Smith, who was both Chief of Staff for Bill Emerson, and Joan Emerson, who succeeded Bill in office. Lloyd, thank you for coming once again.
Glad to be here.
Lloyd, the 1996 campaign was well underway when it was turned upside down by the death of Congressman Bill Emerson. His widow, Joanne, succeeded him, but it was only after a unique campaign in which she ran in two simultaneous elections. That had to be a nightmare for you and the campaign staff. So tell us a little bit about, I'm sure it was disarray, chaos, didn't know what to do. So tell us what you were going through in that time period.
Well, Bill died on a Saturday. The funeral came the following Thursday, and in the in-between time, there was a period there where, you spent, as most folks have realized, you spend time trying to figure out what you're going to do. We ended up having visitation at the Catholic Cathedral in downtown Cape, and then the funeral at the Presbyterian Church that Bill attended there on Broadway. It was kind of a unique time for all of us. For Joanne, the girls, myself, I actually did the eulogy for Bill at his request, which I didn't know he had requested it until a few days before. The funeral was put on KFES, which, we really tossed and turned about should it be that way, but the church only held like 200 people, and they decided that let's let it be recorded and then shown later. They actually did that. He was interned, his grave is in Hillsboro, Missouri, which is located in Jefferson County, where his grandfather grew up and his mom was from. And on that, I'll just share with you, on his tombstone is the quote from Theodore Roosevelt, "In the arena." So that was on that Thursday. And then I guess a unique thing happened on Friday. A lot of political people wanted to know, what's the next step? And part of the law at that time was his name could not be replaced on the ballot for that full term he was running for. So we had another Republican running, and we had a Democrat running. And now we had an election in August and then in November that basically we could have a very weak Republican running. So the meeting on that Friday included a lot of political operatives, myself, Peter Kinder, David Steelman, and others were sitting in the room along with David Limbaugh and discussing next step. And I had talked to Joanne early that morning on that Friday. I said, I think we need to send a signal. If you're thinking about running for the United States Congress, I need to be able to go in that meeting and let them know that, and it'll put everything on hold until your decision is made. Her decision wasn't made until a couple of weeks later. We had a memorial service in Statuary Hall, which is there in the U.S. Capitol. Actually, that's been filmed as well. My wife sang Amazing Grace in Statuary Hall as a part of that ceremony. And it was at that time, a little after that, that Joanne made the decision to run for the United States Congress. The uniqueness that you described, Barry, is true. The governor at that time, Mel Carnahan, called the special election to fill out Bill's unexpired term for the same day as the general election. So both elections were going to occur on November. Joanne could not be on the ballot for that full term unless she ran as an independent. She had to get over 9,000 signatures in less than 21 days to be put on the ballot in November to run for the full term. So on that November of 1996, she ran as an independent on one ballot and as a Republican on the other ballot, and you had to vote for Joanne twice if you wanted to see her elected to those two positions.
Was there a different Republican on that other ballot she's independent on?
There was a Republican on that ballot, yes, and Emily Fireball, who we discussed, had been running against Bill. She was the Democratic nominee. So basically you had two Republicans, You had one independent, one Republican, and one Democrat on that particular ballot. On the other ballot, it was head-to-head. It was a Republican against a Democrat. But that was just for a 2-month term. So the real one was the one where you had an independent, a Republican, and a Democrat.
It was a real nightmare then, wasn't it?
It was complicated. The election law was somewhat clear. There's a lot of attorneys involved telling you what to do and what not to do, what those petitions had to say to get your name on the ballot. Rebecca Cook was our Secretary of State, and we had to do a lot of work with her. She was a Democrat, obviously, from Cape Girardeau County, oddly enough, and we worked very closely to make sure that we did everything by the book, by the rule, in order to get Joanne's name on the ballot. And then we got basically you had to get the 8th District Committee to give her the nomination for the unexpired. It was complicated, but we got it done. But it was a lot of emotion, a lot of paperwork, and a lot of decisions made in a very short period of time. But Joanne made the decision to run for Congress within about 21 days after Bill's death.
So you were kind of in uncharted territory as far as campaign laws and things like that.
Yeah.
Were you concerned at all that you might not be able to pull this off?
You farm, Barry, and in the spring, no matter how bad the harvest was last fall, you have some level of optimism. Mm-hmm. We knew that the Emerson name was very important. We had changed, actually, we called it Team Emerson, and we said, join us now. We had to send a lot of Bill's money back to the individual donors, and then a lot of those donors turned around and gave that money to Joanne. But we couldn't just automatically take Bill Emerson's campaign funds and give them to Joanne.
So it was kind of a juggling act there, wasn't it?
It was a juggling act. It was, I thought I'd seen everything after the Kreitz race of '86 and '88, and Bill Emerson going to Betty Ford in the middle of an election year. I thought, well, I've seen it all until 1996, and we ended up having to get a lot of signatures to get her on the ballot, to have her run as an independent on one ballot and a Republican on the other ballot. We actually did something that they did, I guess during the Depression. You had walk boards. You put them around you, and it said, vote for Joanne twice. We had the big box with the check mark or an X, and we covered about 180 of the major precincts all day on election day, with people going from 6 a.m. in the morning till 7 o'clock at night.
It took a lot of education to make sure that your voter actually got voted the right way, because there's so many ways you can mess up on this.
Yeah, and back then, you had straight ticket voting. So if they had voted straight Republican, Joanne running as an independent, when you had a Republican and a Democrat on the ballot, she would have lost that vote. So we did a lot of education, a lot of direct mail, a lot of phone calls. We had somewhere over 4,000 volunteers helping throughout the 8th Congressional District. In the larger counties, obviously more. But we had like 50 to 75 in the Carter counties and the Shannon counties, 100 volunteers in Ripley County. We had a lot of volunteers helping us get the message out, and it worked. And it helped that we had the Emerson legacy there. We had the period up until Bill's death of serving the people. We had Democrats for Joanne. We had a big push throughout the area. We did, I forget how many stops. Joanne would make 12 to 16 stops a day and try to make them salient. If she was going to Caruthersville and talk about cotton or talking about the river, she made sure she had prepared herself for that discussion. In the same way, if she was in Salem talking about the Ozark National Scenic Riverways or the Mark Twain National Forest, she did her homework, understood about board feet and horsepower on the rivers and access through log roads or no log roads, wild horses in the ONSR. She did her homework so that when she went to those locations, they said, oh, she's not just Bill Emerson's wife. She's someone that knows our district and is willing to work with us and knows our problems and our concerns.
That's a good point, Lloyd. I mean, I'm sure we could do a whole show over the different ways they campaign, because I'm sure Joanne learned a lot from Bill.
Yeah.
But I'm sure they weren't alike at all, their campaign styles.
No.
It sounds like she was maybe more of a student of the game.
Yeah.
And Bill may have listened and took advice more from many, many different people. So what were some of the differences in their campaign styles?
Joanne liked a short, succinct speech. She liked it to be written out, and so she could be 100% prepared, so she could read it a half a dozen times. Bill, on the other hand, we would write the speech. He'd give us his concept of what it ought to have, and the next thing you know, you might as well have just made it into paper airplanes and flown it across the room, because he got up and talked about what he wanted to talk about on that given day. I've stood in the back a lot of times pointing at my watch to let him know that he had gone overtime.
Get off.
And it had no impact whatsoever. With Joanne, if you pointed at the watch, she realized that she was in that 2 or 3 minute window. Joanne really liked even smaller groups than Bill at times. She liked the opportunity to go into different types of businesses. She really liked the small business. She had worked in grassroots operations, so she liked to go into the mom and pop restaurants, the mom and pop stores, the people that make different things in their home and sell them at yard sales or sell them at flea markets. She liked to hear about their stories. And I think in some ways, Bill looked at those opportunities at what does this mean legislative-wise? Joanne looked at those opportunities as just pure people, just people. And I think that was a little bit of a difference, but they had a lot of the same concept when it went to serving, though, once she was elected.
When it was 99 degrees and they were both campaigning, I think I picked Joe and Emerson side. If it's 99 degrees in Crothersville, I would cut it short.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, there were times, when you do like 3 parades or 4 parades, or on the 4th of July, you end up having 2 picnics and 2 parades. You actually had to have enough change of clothes to maybe change clothes twice or 3 times when it was a real hot day, and we did that quite a bit. We used to use a small RV, not the big ones like you see your rock stars have, but we had a small RV that we could keep the clothes in, keep air conditioning, keep lots of coffee, lots of water, try to hydrate. And that campaign, we just made a lot of stops every day.
I remember, Lloyd, the Democrats' big tag on her was she had a Maryland driver's license. And I mean, you remember all that?
Oh, yeah.
The hyperbole that come with running that campaign. Carpetbagger.
Absolutely.
But actually, she had lived here with Bill their whole married life.
Their whole
correct?
married life. When the girls got at school age, they had to make a decision were they going to put them in school here or put them in school there. They ended up putting them in school in McLean, Virginia, just outside of Washington, only because they thought Bill would actually see more of his kids there during the session than he would if they were back in Missouri. That way, if you had a band concert on a Wednesday night and Congress is in session, he could go see Catherine play the oboe, or he could go see Tori's softball game on a Thursday afternoon if he could get away from the Congress. If they were in Missouri and he was in Washington, those opportunities wouldn't have been there.
Which was normal for a congressman or congresswoman, correct?
Yeah, particularly if you have children, you've kind of got to figure out a way to try to balance it all. And so you end up with basically 2 houses. You end up one in the district and one around Washington somewhere.
Well, Lloyd, Joanne was the first woman to represent Missouri in Congress, and most people forget that she served longer than Bill. Yeah. But how did Joanne differentiate herself as far as carrying on Bill's legacy and being a person that makes her own decisions?
I think they were a lot alike in a lot of ways when it came to service. As far as, we had talked earlier about Bill and constituent service. Joanne had seen that was a real important aspect of serving the 8th Congressional District. As we look, though, most of Bill's service was in the minority. Most of Joanne's service was in the majority. And there's a difference in the minority and the majority. As she was in the majority, she moved into some positions on the Appropriations Committee. And thereby you were able to direct dollars for highways, you know, whether it's Highway 60, Highway 412, Highway 67, I could name several, or Southeast Missouri State University for the River Campus, or things up, you know, a bypass here. Hers could be a little bit more hands-on without having to look to the other side for compromise, because she was in the majority. And so she still compromised, but she could also have a stronger hand in the development of legislation. So I think all of it together, they were a lot alike. She liked to do the student things that Bill liked to do. As we move forward, it was easier because we didn't have to use a telephone that had a 100-foot cord on it to do a Congress in the classroom. She liked to come back and do those. But she liked, I think, a lot of times the smaller groups, the kitchen table with the iced tea, and sit around and listen to the concerns that way.
Well, Lloyd, Joanne, the perception was, I don't know if it's reality, that she was more moderate than Bill was. Was that her trying to get out of Bill's shadow, or is that the era of partisanship that evolved her into, with the perception she was more moderate?
You know, I think on some issues, I think she probably was a little bit more moderate. She was strong on the Second Amendment. She was strong on the life issues. She had a little bit different viewpoint as it related to stem cell research, which was a controversial issue early on in her career, and votes that took a position that may have been different than Bill would have taken if he had had that same opportunity to vote. I don't know, because we never really had a vote like that while Bill was the member. But they both usually got the full right to life support. I think part of the thing that changed was that when you're in the majority, you're able to do things for the minority. And I think that caused her many times to do kind of what Bill did, but she would go into urban areas and have urban folks come back to our area. I think it changed some of that dynamic. But she did carry on the legacy on the hunger issues. She did see that was a touch point. I went with her at one point to the Rome because we were looking at the World Hunger Organization, how we were distributing food, the technical side of it. She was really good at the technical part of it too. She worried that, you know, you can send all the food in the world to a country, but if you allow the wrong people to take control of it once it's there, they use it for their political gain rather than feeding the people that need the food. And she saw through some of those smoke screens of goodness to really, is it getting there? And if it's not getting there, let's make sure it gets there. So she was really detailed in that regard.
Joanne enjoyed something that Bill only went through for maybe a year. Joanne was in the majority the whole time she was in Congress, correct?
Almost the whole time. We lost the majority in 2006. So from January of 2007 until January of 2011, she was in the minority. Up until then, she'd been in the majority all the way from, she was sworn in actually early, like as soon as the election was certified in November of '96. So she was sworn in right around Thanksgiving that year.
Well, Bill, out of necessity, crossed party lines and did a great job of compromising with Democrats. Joanne never really had to do that. Which one was more difficult?
You know, I think they both had their positives and they both had their negatives. But from a constituent service or providing benefits to the district, being in the majority and Joanne being on appropriations was really pretty doggone awesome. We could move things pretty quickly. We could add a little money for highways. I remember one time we were trying to improve Highway 60 between Poplar Bluff and I guess Poplar Bluff and Willow Springs, but actually Poplar Bluff out past Elsinore. And there was about an 11-mile section in there. It's Highway 21 goes north, and Highway 21 goes south. You go to Doniphan, you go to Ellington. And we actually dropped in and Joanne was able to put money in to build that section of Highway 64 lane. And we used the old Field of Dreams thing, if we build it, they will come. And now you can drive a 4-lane highway all the way from Sikeston to Springfield.
Well, Lloyd, many people in southeast Missouri, the whole state of Missouri, they give you a lot of credit for bridging that gap, that transition. You made it seamless from Bill to Joanne. What was it like for you working for both of them? We've kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, but
Yeah.
What was it like working for both of them?
You know, a couple of things. Joanne and I are pretty close to the same age. She's right at a year older than I am. So we're pretty close to the same age. So we were real careful about me driving her all over the district all by myself. You know, you worry a little bit about image. You didn't want to send the wrong signal. I spent a lot more time driving Bill Emerson around. I kid people, you know, and maybe I don't, that I'll probably, you know, I don't smoke, but I've had my share of secondhand smoke with Bill. But I think the big difference would be Joanne wanted to be more hands-on in everything, and Bill wanted to be more conceptual. You know, if he told me about the Ozark National Scenic Riverways, he pretty well knew kind of what we thought together, but Joanne wanted to know how far up and downstream can you go with a 40 horsepower jet prop? How far north and south of Van Buren, let's say? And there'd be days I'd have to go research it because I didn't know. So she was a lot more detailed at times. Bill was a lot more philosophical in the global decision making, and probably at times gave the staff a little bit more latitude to make decisions out there in the field. I usually tried to let him know before I did anything terrible, and tried to make sure that I had 100% permission before you walk into a meeting with the Corps of Engineers. And there were a few times that, you know, I didn't do that, and I wished I had with Joanne.
Lloyd, when Bill Emerson was first elected, he was the lone wolf down here. He was the only Republican surrounded by all Democrats.
Yeah.
In Washington and Jeff City. 40 years later, there's not a single Democrat from this area in Jefferson City. Do you think this is a result of an ideological or a generational change?
Oh, you know, I think part of it is the Democratic Party began to drift a little bit with Mondale in 1984, a little bit more with the caucus in 1988. They came back, you know, with Clinton in 92, and Clinton did very well in Missouri in 92 and 96, did pretty well in our district both times. But I think part of it is just what direction do people in southeast Missouri believe the country should go, and what government should and should not do. And I think by the Democratic Party choosing to do a little bit, have government do more rather than less, I think some of our folks kind of moved over. We've seen a huge transformation at county level government. Mm-hmm. When we elected a Republican in Mississippi County to be the presiding commissioner by either 8 or 12 votes, I forget what it was, I was shocked. Because remember, we've talked in earlier episodes about me growing up a Democrat and going to East Prairie to buy groceries on a Saturday, and there was almost, you know, 3 or 4 Republicans, and you pointed them out, you know, like they were lepers or something. And then all of a sudden, we actually win a countywide election. It was pretty amazing. Even in Cape County, when Bill was elected, the courthouse had more Democrats in the courthouse than they had Republicans. Now, that's not been true for 2 decades or longer now, but it was true early on. The good thing would be if we had more open discussion about the issues that are facing America and facing the district. And I think sometimes that we lost a lot, in my opinion, when we lost a lot of our weekly and daily newspapers. You know, we used to have to cater to the guy who called Bill Emerson the Emocrats that started to support him. We used to have to cater to the newspaper in Kennett and Dexter, in Sikeston and Poplar Bluff. we used to go in and sit down with them and discuss the issues. And people would pick up their newspaper and read about the interview that Bill had or Joanne had about an issue that impacted Poplar Bluff or the Port Authority in Pemiscot County or the cotton classing office at Hayti. You actually talked about issues with media and journalists that would actually talk about things that were important to that community that right then, not next year or 10 years from
Real
now.
time.
Real-time conversations. And I think sometimes I miss that. I know that people, in my opinion, would be better informed voters and citizens if we still had access to that.
I agree.
And it's been awkward, I think, for a guy that grew up on a party line, and there'll be some of your viewers who know what that is, you do, and for a guy that grew up with a weekly paper, a guy that grew up with two major papers in St. Louis, both the Globe Democrat and the Post-Dispatch, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, and you would see the liberal and the conservative view. And anymore, it's like that's not available to us with the new electronic world we're in. The very thing that we're doing now was never heard of 20 years ago. And so now we're doing things differently. And I'm not sure we've gotten to the point to have the kind of discussions we've been having or the kind of discussions that need to be happening without people yelling over the top of the other person in that conversation. Sometimes when I'm driving on Highway 60, I think about the negotiations that Joanne did to get that 11 miles done between the 21s. Or sometimes when I'm sitting at the river campus looking at the bridge, I think about Bill talking about let's get a new bridge, but he never lived to see it. But now it's named after him. And I can usually look just about in any community and see something that the Emersons worked on, in many cases with Democrats, to achieve a goal that would make life better for the people in that area. And truthfully, that's really what it was all about. It wasn't about rising up to get yet another job. It was about doing the job you had the best you could and giving the people the kind of service they deserve.
And their legacy is your legacy. You left a great legacy here in Southeast Missouri.
Yeah.
You're not dying. You've got a lot of years left. But this brings me to my last question. You know, you get calls from candidates all the time. Do you miss it? Do you feel like getting back into the mix, getting in the middle of this thing we call politics?
Yeah.
Do you miss it at all? What would you miss about it?
We're in the arena, okay? Mm-hmm. When you're in the arena, you know, as that quote says, you're not with those tired and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat. I think the thing that I miss about being in public service is making the difference, pushing the bureaucracy to do what it ought to do. In many cases, it should do, and it knows it should do, but sometimes you have to push it just a little bit harder. And it could be a levy project, it could be a constituent inquiry about their disability, it could be lots of different things. But I miss sometimes being able to pick up the phone and make a difference to a community or to an individual, and having given that authority by my boss, in this case, Joanne or Bill. Mm-hmm. I said, yeah, get that done. And it really was enjoyable to go into the arena and do battle to improve situations that improve lives and livelihoods. And I miss that part of it.
You know, we've been trying to promote civility in politics.
Yeah.
I think Joe and Emerson tried to promote civility in politics.
Yeah.
So did Bill had to.
Absolutely.
Or he would have never won.
Absolutely.
Tell us a little bit how you feel about more civility in politics.
You know, I think we ought to get back to having small groups of members who are on different political schematics, you know, whether you're right or left. I think it'd be important to bring them here. I remember when we brought Guy Molinari, who was a member of Congress from New York City, and we brought him to a farm, actually several farms in Southeast Missouri, on one of our farm tours that we did, and he was amazed about what he saw. I think it made him appreciate us. Counter to that, Bill Emerson actually went into New York to some of the places that needed the additional food, and he realized then, how can we make a difference for the people there and connect it to the farming communities back home? I think walking the mile in another guy's shoes, going to another district, looking at those people eyeball to eyeball, And if people would read a little bit more and try to get a balanced approach, I think the country would be in a better place. I'm one of those that's an eternal optimist. I yell at the TV just like everyone else. We may yell at a different station, but I think ultimately we are still a beacon of hope in the world. We've done more for more people in the world and expanded our boundaries less than any other country in history. And so we don't colonize every place around the world. We hope that freedom will be there for everyone. And I think if we can improve the quality of life and give people, we can't guarantee outcomes, but we need, if we can, to guarantee the opportunities to succeed. I think the will of the people will move in that right direction. My hope is that we can get there someday.
The election of 1980 changed the political landscape in Southeast Missouri. When Bill Emerson became the first Republican to represent Southeast Missouri in Congress, little did he know that his election would launch a political transformation in Southeast Missouri. When his wife Joanne was elected to replace him after his death in 1996, she continued the legacy they had really begun together 16 years earlier. Shortly after beginning her 9th term in Congress, Joanne resigned her seat to become the president and CEO of the National Rural Electric Cooperative Association. She served as CEO until August 2015, when she suffered a stroke. She currently resides in a retirement community in Washington, D.C. Thank you for joining us again. Lloyd, thank you. And thank all of our guests for helping us trace the impact of Bill and Joan Emerson in the transformation of Southeast Missouri politics. And join us later this year as we promote civility in politics.